All right. Okay. Can I have your attention? We're going to call our Moab City Council meeting to order on September 12th, 2023 at 6 p.m. And I'm going to ask Patrick Robbins to lead us in the pledge this evening.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Patrick. All right, we're going to start off our meeting with a proclamation on welcoming and belonging. And just in case you didn't know, this week, September 8th through the 17th is Welcoming. And Welcoming Week is international involvement that brings communities and neighbors together of all backgrounds to build strong connections and to affirm the importance of inclusive places, one of which Moab is. And so with that, I'm going to read a proclamation of welcoming and belonging. Whereas Moab City recognizes that as a community, we are looking for ways to celebrate diversity, equity, and inclusion. And whereas Moab City enhances the health, economic prosperity, and well-being for current and future generations. And whereas hate and bias are not acceptable in our community, Moab City remains committed to our vision of welcoming and belonging, recognizing diversity as a key strength. And whereas Moab City affirms that our community's success depends on making sure that all residents feel welcome, that all people, regardless of race, nationality, gender, disability, or religion, brings fresh perspectives, new ideas, business, and a valuable diversity of life and fostering of welcoming environment for all, regardless of immigration status, race, ethnicity, place of origin, English language proficiency, religion, income, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, differing abilities, age, and other factors. Now, therefore, the Moab City Council members and the mayor hereby proclaim our ongoing support of embracing diversity and ensuring a welcoming environment for all in our community. Moab City strongly stands against hate, bias, and violence of any kind based on race, nationality, gender, disability, or religion. And we urge all residents to come together and support their neighbors. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the city of Moab on the 12th day of September, 2023, announces a commitment to the welcoming and belonging proclamation for the city of Moab.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah.
I'm the only one that agrees.
So with that, I'd like to ask for a motion to accept this proclamation of welcoming and belonging for the city of Moab. Ronnie.
I'll move to accept, but I will make a personal comment that since we as council members are on here as signees, I'd just like to say personally, I would like to stand against hate, bias, or violence of any kind, not just that based on, I don't want to see any based on race, nationality, gender, disability, or religion. I also don't want to see any other hate, bias, or violence. So just with clarifying that.
Yeah. Thanks, Ronnie. Do I have a second?
I'll second. And can I make just a quick comment?
Sure.
And I support this. I understand the spirit in which it was written, and I do support it. I just want to make sure that the public knows that bias exists. We all have it, whether it's harmful or not. I mean, it really isn't a harmful bias if you like green apples over red apples. We don't want people just to be of one identity. And there's a quote from Dr. Patel, who is with the Dignity Index. And he says, the guiding metaphor for a diverse economy is a potluck. No one wants to melt their identity into a melting pot. And at a potluck, everyone is considered a contributor. So I think it's important that we all bring something to the table.
Thanks, Tani. I have a motion by Ronnie, seconded by Tani. Any further discussion by council? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, council. Next, we move on to public comments, limited to 3 minutes per person. If you'd like to speak, please fill out a form and give it to me or Carly.
Sorry. Can I give her yours? Sarah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't reach into there. Thanks.
All right, Sarah, you're up.
Hey, how are you?
This might take me more than 3 minutes. Just so you know. No, I'm
That
kidding.
looks like a
I'm
three
kidding.
minute. 3 minute.
I
piece of
wanted to,
paper.
huh?
That looks like 3 minutes.
I wanted to thank the city for the community contributions and give a little update. 19 years ago, last month, we started Friends of the Parkway in partnership with the city. That was back in the olden days where you just said, okay, we'll be partners, and there was nothing written. It continues to this day, even though I don't think it's memorialized in the city. 15 years ago in August, we started working with the homeless people. Did a lot of homeless outreach, which continues to today, but we broadened out to do emergency support for anyone in need in this community. So we're the only organization available 24/7, and we're very happy we can be available. A lot of things happen after 5 or weekends and holidays, and a lot of weird stuff happens in the middle of the night. Ask any police officer. We get a lot of calls from them in the middle of the night, and we do everything we can to try to help them out. I spent $5,301 last month on assistance. That's a little bit high, but it's not abnormal. Since 2020, we've spent $145,718.42 on direct assistance to people, verified needs, and 2020 was double because a lot of people in this community wanted to give so we could help people in the shadows. So we really appreciate that. Generally, we spend under 40,000 a year. The funds are all given by the community for the community. And that's really a beautiful thing. And I'm just going to surprise you all. I'm not going to say one word about recycling.
You just did.
This time.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Sarah, is this for the do you want me to put this in the record for
Oh,
Summer's
yeah, I was
minutes?
gonna mention, those are documents that memorialize the fact that there is a Friends of the Parkway in partnership with the city. It doesn't require anything on your behalf, just supporting it.
Mhm.
I used to always have a display out in the hallway all August, inviting people to join, and we're still doing film and so finding mattresses in this room.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
I love the park.
Thanks.
No more hate, no more hate.
Anybody else? Public comments?
Thanks, Karen.
Hello.
My name is Karen Guzman Newton. I am here tonight for 2 reasons. I would like to talk about safety on Main Street. I'm asking the council to please take seriously how dangerous our Main Street is. We have freight trucks and vehicle traffic speeding through downtown every single day, every single hour, on every minute. Collectively, we need to let UDOT know that our intersections are dangerous and we don't want to wait for someone else to be killed before we take actions. We've been talking about 204, 400 North for over 7 years. I have emails dated back to then, and nothing has been done. Before I left council, we had a UDOT transportation meeting, and I mentioned that the light at 200 North has been out, and it is 2.5 years later, and it is still out. UDOT said it was the city's responsibility. The city said it was UDOT's. It doesn't matter whose it is. It's a really dangerous intersection, and something needs to be done. Secondly, the city has an opportunity currently to pursue grant money to make infrastructure improvements to the downtown area. There are projects that are in desperate need of attention downtown, such as our crumbling sidewalks, dead trees, trash can receptacles that are falling apart, street sweeping. The downtown looks a mess, and the money could be used to help facilitate a more robust accessibility for all side street parking projects that were cut. I know that we had limited funds from UDOT to do aesthetic treatments, but this rural Utah funding could be used for economic diversification. Basically, it's if we could show that treating our downtown, making it better, it would help our businesses, which would also help your sales tax revenue. So I would just really like for the city to consider partnering with the county. They're very, very interested, in partnering together to go after, $1.2 million. The county is able to write a grant for 600 and the city is able to go for 600,000, as well. And the chances of us getting funding together as a collaborative project is much greater. So, I would really like you guys to consider, moving forward with that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, sure, Tony.
Kind of piggybacking what she said there, but I'd like to give this. Back before just was done quickly. So speed on ground, it's not correct.
Thank you.
Photos that we took today of the downtown area. I'm kind of running, really is, what Karen said about the downtown area getting that stuff kind of in a blight situation. If you would read that, you so eloquently read the start, I'd like you to read that.
Well, this is time for public comment. So if you'd like to make a comment, I'm happy to have you read it to us.
Well, you read it, you're better at it than I am.
Well, I don't think it's
do
appropriate
that?
for me to make public comments
All
during the
right,
public.
I'll read it.
But thank you for your
I
support
typed
of my
I typed one of these up for every one of the city council people also. I'd like to bring to attention the deteriorating sidewalks, curbs, trees, stumps and weeds and curbs and gutters on Main and Center Street. The weeds growing out of the sidewalks and curbs are unsightly and need to be addressed. As business owner, I have had several tourists comment on the sad condition of our sidewalks on Main Street. There seems to be curbs and gutters in town that still have sand and debris from last year's flood. Our sidewalks are in such a condition that it is difficult for any elderly or handicapped people to negotiate. It is my understanding that there have been instances where people have tripped and fallen on uneven concrete, which have resulted in injury. By repairing and replacing sidewalks, the city may avoid possible lawsuits. The old trash receptacles need replaced and they are unsanitary and unsightly. Some are covered with graffiti, missing doors, and trash is often spilled out onto the sidewalks. There are deteriorating buildings on Main Street that should be addressed under city codes. And I'm sure you're all aware of that. We live in one of the most beautiful areas in the world. This is my opinion. It's a shame that our city looks dirty and unkept. We should, as a city, welcome our many visitors with pride in a city we love. The downtown area is sad. I would admonish everybody in here to really study it. Look at those photos I took today. Take a walk down Main Street.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you. As far as I want to replace the sidewalks, I spend whatever it takes to replace the curb and gutters on my side.
Thank you. Any other public comments this time?
Can we ask a clarifying question? I think there's a reference to the light being out at 200 North, but we don't have a light at 200 North. Can we just verify which light that was?
So it's at the, Hagen, I don't, is that not 200? So like across from Wendy's,
There isn't a light there.
There's not a light.
there's, yeah.
Oh,
it's-
okay.
Oh, yes.
City light.
Oh, okay. No, thanks. I was a little bit confused. And then I did have a question. How does this work in our meeting rules and procedures? It says in public comments, we don't speak, but we can ask for some follow-up. So since, a big focus of this council has been, grants and looking for opportunities when money is available and partnership opportunities with the county. I don't know if any of the other council, but I would be interested in an agenda item at one of our next meetings, because I didn't know what the timeline is for this grant money, to find out more about it.
Okay, thanks. I think we're all aware of that, those grants. Do you
Yeah,
have
I
any
mean, I
comment?
can answer it now. I think this was, our COGS come up every year. And we applied last year and got a childcare grant and that ultimately kind of fell through. We had to give the money back. We're exploring the option of using this grant to maybe help offset some costs for our dispersed parking project, which is already in the pipeline. And we might have a deficit there when we start to open bids. So we might already kind of be on the hook for some money that we didn't plan for spending. And as you know, we are going for grants to CIB this January for downtown master planning work. So before we start doing project specific work, I would recommend we do the master planning first and then seek grants for specific projects to implement that plan. So we talked about that at strategic planning this year.
What about this?
Well, we're not gonna have an interchange right now. This is a public comment and the council asked a specific question to staff. And so I'm gonna move
Yeah,
on.
Okay.
Usually don't go to maintenance, like grants usually aren't available for O&M. It's like new capital.
Okay,
or
well,
pro-
I'll just, I'll follow up with other council, but I would still be interested in an agenda item to discuss if there's an opportunity for this money, because we discussed many times with our downtown dispersed parking that, there's only so much money for aesthetics and things might fall short. And it seems like, we're trying to say, we want to be more responsive to improving the quality of life and having a vibrant community and our mission for our community. So if there's a no-brainer opportunity for money to help make some of that happen, I'd like the opportunity to discuss that, but I'll
Yeah.
follow up with the rest of you and see if there's anybody supports me on that.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it wouldn't necessarily be no brainer money. It would be a shift in our priorities for this year, which we can amend the strategic plan, certainly. It would mean that we'd have to maybe not do master planning first and start doing projects, but that sequence, I would say, like if we wanted to do some different kinds of projects, our COG would be great to go after like next year and when we have like construction capacity. But we're doing big projects in downtown. Dispersed parking is going to be pretty intensive for staff.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna move on then, unless we have any other public comments. All right, I'll move on to department head reports, and that is David to give us a finance department update.
Not a department head, but I'm playing one on TV. Yes. David Everett, I'm your interim finance helper. And I got a few things to tell you about. One is that we're going to get back on track doing monthly, basically profit and loss statements for the city for you. That'll start at the next meeting, and then we'll be doing quarterly more in-depth financial statements, producing those as well. That's something that had happened over the years and dropped off. And so we're going to get back in the habit of doing that. It's been interesting. Since I was here, the city left and then returned to the world of Polaris, which is your financial accounting software and budgeting software. It's really a robust system, but in that time, there were definitely some things that got a little bit discombobulated, I think it's fair to say. And so we're really in the process. And when I say we, I mean me and the recorder and the treasurer and Danny's pitching in as well as the institutional memory to really try to figure out how to make sure we got things in Polaris the way they should be. And so that sets you up well in the future for reporting and for tracking, obviously, and comparing, budgets and actuals to years past type thing. So that's a lot of what I've been working on. There are a few projects that have also been sort of in the works in terms of studies. One is this comprehensive financial sustainability plan that Lewis Young, LYRB, are in the process of updating for you. So I've been working with them to get them more information based on more information that will give them a basis to do an evaluation about what the city's long-term financial sustainability needs are, right? And so that one is still in the works. A second one is a disproportionate services fee study. That one, the consultants, I think, are about ready to wrap that up in the next month or so. We should have a report to you in November. And that's looking at where police services in particular are being disproportionately deployed in the city to see if there's a case to be made for a certain assessment of fees based on the type of business. So we're working on that one. And then recently your treasurer, Marcy, drafted a banking services request for proposal. So we're going to be evaluating options there with regard to who provides banking services for you all, because that has not been done in a while. And that is a service that's contracted out and would be good to get bids on and see where people come in terms of providing services. And then, as happens every year, an annual audit will be conducted, and we're in the process of collecting and putting together the information needed for the auditors prior to their arrival here, probably at the end of this month is what we're looking at in terms of the auditors coming in. So those are really kind of, I guess, sort of the high level updates on projects that are ongoing. One thing I will mention too is that you all use this portal, I guess you could say, or this website called ClearGov to really present the budget and show the breakdown of expenditures as proposed. I've been mostly working on figuring out how to make that work for the budget so that it coordinates best with Polaris. It's been a very slightly tedious process, but we're getting there. It's a little bit delayed in terms of being something that'll be forward facing, but my hope is that in the next 3 to 4 weeks, we'll have that up there so that anybody can click on it. It's a very clear and easy way to see what the FY24 budget that you all approved is, instead of it just being a printout out of Polaris. That's probably where we're headed.
Thanks, David. Questions? All right.
Cool.
You're done. Thanks.
Thank you.
More to come from David. I think we'll get a financial report at our next meeting.
That's right. The monthly. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. And then we'll actually, just really quick, we'll do a wrap up of fiscal year 23 at the next meeting as well.
Great. Thanks. All right. Moving on to item number 5, consent agenda. We have 2 items on our agenda this evening. 5.1, approval of the minutes from August 22nd, 2023 regular meeting, and approval of the bills against the city of Moab in the amount of $1,562,038.04. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Motion by Kalen, second,
I'll second it.
seconded by Jason. Any discussion, Kalen?
No.
Jason?
No.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. On to general business. Our first item on general business is a public hearing. And this public hearing is to allow public input regarding the issuance and sale of not more than $4,500,000 aggregate principal amount of the sales tax revenue bond series 2023. And B, any potential economic impact that the project will be financed with the proceeds of said bonds may have on the private sector and all related matters. This is in regards to the Cane Creek Boulevard upgrade that we're going to be doing. And this is just a process that we have to do for the bonding. So I'm going to open this public hearing at 6:23 p.m. and ask if anybody has any comments. Okay, any questions from the council? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing at 6:23 and move on to the next item. We'll be hearing more about this, I'm sure, in the coming months. Our next item is the consideration of a contract award to LeGrand Johnson for 2023 roadway chip seal coat project in the amount of $346,977. And Chuck.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say that thanks to the public for being patient while we got the water lines repaired on Mill Creek Drive and the surrounding streets. And now finally that's done, and we're going to go back in and chip seal it and stripe it. And so it'll be a good looking road again. It's our busiest road. That's a series of roads around there. And don't want to jinx this, knock on wood, but for the first time we came in under budget in a long time on a bid.
Great.
So maybe there's a trend. We're hopeful, but I'd be happy to answer any questions. The work should begin within the month and should only take a few weeks, and it'll end up being chip sealed and striped.
Great. Questions for Chuck? All right, I'll ask for a motion to approve the contract award for LeGrand Johnson.
I move to award the 2023 roadway chip seal project construction contract to LeGrand Johnson in the amount of $346,997 and authorize the mayor to sign the notice of intent to award and contract.
Second,
Second.
seconded by Kalen. Any discussion, Tawny?
Nope.
Kalen?
No.
Anyone else? This is a roll call vote because it's an expenditure. Jason?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Kalen?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Corey, and this is the consideration of the adoption of the amendments to 1082 South Highway 191. This is the Shumway pre-annexation agreement, which you all approved at our last meeting. However, we discovered at that time that there was some miscommunication between the applicant and his attorney, and that's been cleared up, and so we needed to make some changes. Corey, why don't you go ahead and let us know what those changes are and
Sure, and
under consideration?
certainly without going into a shared document and going line by line, essentially they were clerical modifications from the applicant team made to an applicant team's document. The non-clerical were based around some of the original provisions for a multi-household inclusion to the development, which has not been part of the proposal since very early on. So the major red line components were removing that multi-household component, essentially offering up within the restriction that if any residential development is to be proposed in the lot, 100% will be AH, but none is being proposed at this time. So I think that characterizes all of any substantial amendments to that document.
Questions for Corey? Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the amendments to the Shumway pre-annexation agreement for 1082 South Highway 191, Moab, Utah 84532.
Thanks, Kalen. Second,
Second.
seconded by Luke. Any discussion, Kalen?
No.
Luke? Anybody else? I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. All right. Next, we move on to our biggest item this evening, which will also be Alexi and Corey. You guys, we've had a couple of workshops on this, our landscape ordinance. And so tonight, it's up for your consideration. And so the consideration is the adoption of ordinance 2023-08, an ordinance amending the text of the Moab Municipal Code, section 17.06, definition 17.0, supplementary requirements and procedures applicable within zones, and creating chapter 17.10 landscaping standards to add water efficient landscaping standards with review and approval procedures. All right, you guys, here we go. All right, this is a very significant ordinance that I think is going to be a really good one.
I'm sharing my screen.
Yeah, this TV isn't even on up here.
We have.
Is that remote?
We can look up here. Let's
Yeah,
not
that's
take
okay.
a whole lot of time.
All right. Quick reminder, this is the path that we have followed to get here, starting in August 2021 with our consultants from Water Now and Western Resource Advocates. The staff have talked to Planning Commission, City Council, held workshops with Planning Commission. We've done some outreach in the community, did a public hearing with the Planning Commission, and we've done 2 workshops with City Council. And tonight we have some revisions based on our last conversation, and there will be the opportunity for action. If we go forward with some changes to the landscaping code and amendments, we will have the opportunity to notify the Utah Division of Water Resources about our new ordinance, which would qualify people who live here for their landscape conversion incentive. And we would also conduct education outreach to help people understand what the provisions are and what different types of properties would do over time to be compliant. Okay, these are the changes. You got them in your packet. We're going to run through them. I'm going to switch over to the ordinance. The main thing that we thought we would focus on for discussion would be the indoor water conservation standards. If there are other areas in which you have questions or discussion, we can also spend more time on those. So I will go through the smaller changes or what we think are the smaller changes, and then come back to the water conservation standards to discuss the legal non-conforming changes that we made. Okay. First change, this one was a request to add a baseline. So we added in a more recent baseline into the whereas statements. We added definitions, which we went through last time for active rainwater, catchment for effective precipitation. And then this is one we didn't mention last time, but we took out personal from the definition of personal agriculture cultivation, the requirement for a sustainable access to water supply. We felt like that was more of a regulatory phrase that would need to be put in the ordinance if we wanted to do that. Otherwise, it's just not a requirement. And then we added secondary water, which is related to another request we'll go to for a clarification later in the ordinance. Okay, so on water features, one of the discussions we had last time was whether wind shutoff devices are available and people could use these. We did get some feedback from our consultants about the types of water feature wind shutoff devices that are available. In general, they seem to be affordable, but the kind of thing that would be specific to your water feature. We did add some clarification here that it would be specifically for water features that have waterfalls or vertical fountains. So it wouldn't inadvertently affect things like pools or spas or streams in somebody's yard.
Do you want us to hold comments until
If
the
you
end?
would like to discuss, we can now. Mhm.
Sure. So I appreciated the product reference. That particular product, although it was affordable, it appeared that in order to actually use it as a control device, that was part of a $700 package.
Mhm.
And it was not immediately apparent how one would integrate it into a typical home feature. So using that product category, I went and searched on the internet, and it seemed like they are available. They typically, I mean, that was on the cheap side, but typically they're over 1,000, and they're just look like they are designed for larger municipal scale
Mhm.
fountains. So I still question whether, like, for homeowners who have smaller water features, if this is excessively burdensome, but I'm willing to approve it as is, but I have a suspicion that if you are to enforce it, that you might get some complaints.
Mhm.
That it might be a disproportionate burden for relative, especially relative to the amount of water saved for a low volume home scale water feature.
Yes, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, if I might jump in with that, is I think with that in context, the coverage that we're trying to approach is for an elective element. This is a water feature within our particular region, which would have otherwise maybe been a prohibited element altogether, even versus commercial to more attainable for a residential scale. So it's, I think, to the council, what your direction would like to be, whether this is becoming an element that would maybe be nominally saving an amount of water, but to the larger effect, water features are not a conservation element. So whether we're trying to advance or promote those or make them attainable, I think that's the question that we would have, is what direction would you like us to go with that or see? Because those are great, very great points. So in an effort to be accommodating to as many elements as possible, but then giving conditions to those elements, this seemed like what could be reasonable, even though maybe that price tag is $700 or more. Considering what a water feature or typical bigger water features might be, that maybe is a nominal cost to the larger feature itself.
Well, I guess my question would be, what is your definition of a waterfall feature? You know, I have a koi pond in my backyard this small, and I have a, 3 feet stack of rocks with a hose coming out of it, pouring down the rocks. Is that a waterfall?
I feel like, go ahead. Did you?
Nope, go for it.
Oh, I was going to say that I do feel like if we wanted to get into a greater definition of what a waterfall is, if we wanted to add a specific height, we could. The intention is to get things where the wind would catch it. So it would not be something that was 24 inches or something off the ground. It would be something that would have enough verticality that the wind would be blowing water onto a sidewalk, something of that nature.
So it seems like it should be defined.
We can do that.
Yeah, that was whereas I have a koi pond too with a small waterfall, and it seems like a literal reading of this was that it would require a wind shut off device, but I mean, it just has a 110 plug to a outdoor outlet, and so integrating one of these wind shut off devices is not straightforward.
I wanted to offer that confirmation that that would be how I think from planning, we would approach that, is that would be based on the definition of water feature, a water feature that would need to be mitigated. So the answer is yes. But whether, again, the question is, do you want to go to that extent is, I think, a council question.
Well, it seems like the whole water budget approach is sort of a performance approach to meeting the intent of the code. But this is a very rigid prescriptive requirement, which I understand. I mean, it makes sense for a larger scale feature, but then if you end up enforcing on smaller scale features, it seems like that might have.
It's up to the interpretation of who's ever approving it.
Was there any guidance from the consultants about that? Because I guess we're probably not the first community to kind of struggle with that. Or I didn't know, is it similar to sprinklers? Like is something, you know, if you've got a drip system where you've got a sprayer that's this high, is it not considered one? But if it's like this high, I didn't know. Yeah.
We do have Lindsay and Victoria with us. Would either of you like to add to this? Looks like we have Victoria with us.
Yep. Hey, and I think Lindsay is here as well. Let me get my video on. Hey, I would say, you know, what we've seen in practice with other communities that have an ordinance such as this, you know, this is really just a best practice. I think when a lot of, you know, permit applicants are installing those new landscapes and want water features on their property, this is really just a best practice that these new water features are coming, or you're at least adding on a wind shutoff device to when those are installed, you know, based on what the manufacturer is recommending and the specs of that specific water feature. And Lindsay, I didn't know if you want to add in something else.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that this language was pulled directly from the town of Castle Rock, which is a community in Colorado that's had this code in place for a number of years. I haven't heard concerns from them about implementing this component of the code, and we have talked to them extensively about their code. So to Victoria's point, you know, this would follow manufacturer specifications and, you know, and their best practices and guidelines. But I don't know if that helps, just the fact that this is coming from a city that's implemented it prior to Moab.
Thank you. Okay, so
Any other questions on that particular item?
are there any other questions about what I have heard is that we should define water feature better. Is that correct?
Yeah, because like I'm not sure, I haven't ever really like thoroughly looked into water fountains, but are there potentially consumer water fountains that already have some sort of design elements like incorporated that take wind into consideration? So if there's something that already has like the cost of considering wind incorporated into the design, and then we're asking them to add an additional cost on top of something that's already been somewhat mitigated for. Yeah, I think there's potentially a lot of scenarios where the broadness of this definition can have like unintended consequences. And I wonder if potentially there is like a vertical distance or something where like the water falls, and then potentially like an overall like gallon capacity of the water feature where it like surpasses it, so that it primarily targets kind of like larger water features potentially at like larger commercial facilities that might be able to afford some of these kind of more expensive devices.
The next one is, we took out the reference to recycled water in order to avoid confusion, with gray water recirculation systems, and where that would be used. So we just removed it. For sub-metering, this was something our consultants also helped us with. They checked on, where these had been used, and in their experience, this is actually a rare type of property that has a non-residential irrigated landscape of 5,000 square feet or more, and that it would be managed by the property owner, because it would create complexity if the city owned the meter that the property owner was using. The intention is to help people manage their water so they would know which parts of their water are going to their house versus to the landscape. But it is an unusual situation for somebody to have 5,000 square feet or more of residential irrigated landscape. Are there any questions or comments on that? This was the clarification that required the secondary water definition in the special features. Instead of saying surface water, we use the language secondary water to be more specific about what we're referring to. And in exemptions, one of the requests from council was that we applied some general standards to properties that were previously exempt where it would make sense. After going through the list, it looked like there were some properties that it made sense to follow just the irrigation system standards. So we've split them into types of areas that would be still exempt, like interior remodels, demolitions, change of use, ecological restoration projects that don't require permanent irrigation. And then a separate section for ones that could still use the provisions for irrigation systems. So that would be the replacement of an irrigation system, active recreation, cemeteries, historic sites, or plant collections. Any discussions or questions? And we also removed the replacement of existing plant material from the exemptions. And we did that because it was covered by other provisions in the code, so it was redundant. The only other comment we had was that the appendices that are on here will be updated to reflect whatever the decisions are. So I know we've had some comments about if there were inconsistencies between the appendices and things currently in the code. Every time we change the code, it would change the appendices. We'll update them with whatever the final decisions are. With that, we'll head back up to the indoor water conservation. What we did here is we added a legal non-conforming section that would apply to existing buildings that are in the lodging units. And also when they are remodeled or refreshed, any modification to the fixtures would come into compliance with the section. So we tried to walk the line of being specific, but not overly prescriptive. Corey, did you want to add anything to that?
The one word on here is it's slightly new that we haven't really used in the code before is refreshed. That is a metric term from that industry. When the hoteliers are organizing and converting and new changes of ownership, that's a commonly used phrase with the building department. So that's not something we don't have typical definition circumstance for that. But what that might mean is all new carpet, new painting, but they're maybe not getting into what would be structural alterations of a significant degree. But at that point, if they're making any modifications to fixtures at that point, they would be ushered into this legal non-conforming status to bring them into compliance with at least those features. So we didn't get into the minutia of what refreshed is, but we tried to use that term as to help that category of land use be more familiar with what we're trying to accomplish. So That was really, again, we met with Barry Elson, the building official, to find that balance, particularly for lodging units. He was able to confirm that many of those, this was one of those, I wish he was in the audience at our previous meeting. Many of the contemporary hotels are utilizing those water efficient fixtures already. Appliances is a separate different category that we have not been analyzing, so we don't have any great data on that. But he did confirm many of our more historic lodging overnight accommodations do not have efficient fixtures. So this will be a significant aspect when many of those hotels come into probably new ownership and either a refreshing phase or a true redevelopment phase.
But if they stay status quo, they can stay that way.
That's right. That's right. Yep. And again, within that refresh, depending if it's really superficial, they can even make some of those minor refreshing modifications without possibly bringing this aspect in. So that in that refreshed is where if you're changing upholsteries on some things, we're not gonna
If you break it.
bring your
Put it in
whole
water.
minimum compliance. But right, there is a little bit more grab and teeth there than if we had just said we're not touching anything that doesn't require a permit.
Any questions on this section? No?
Okay, that is the end of the update we had.
Any overall questions for staff in general about this ordinance?
No question, but just praise. Good work.
I got a couple of
Huge
questions.
project.
Okay,
Um,
go ahead.
So my couple questions, I guess part of my frustration with the landscaping ordinance in general is the water thing. I think is great. I think it needs to happen, and I think it's good and stuff. But what I'm kind of curious about is a single family builds a home and they get their home built, they get their certificate of occupancy, they move in, but they don't have the yard done. And then all of a sudden they come in and they put lawn in, and it's not good. Or it doesn't conform to this, or they didn't for it. My question is how the city is going to kind of enforce that or talk to them about that. And I guess my frustration with this is that and there's one section in here that says that landscaping will be free of weeds, garbage, litter, things like that. I can drive around Moab and I can take a picture of 30 homes who are not maintaining this ordinance. And so nothing, and they've been done like that for years. So are we going to start going after a single family home who puts in a bunch of lawn and say, hey, you have 30 days to get this out? And so I guess we're creating all these ordinances to do things, but we're not enforcing them, or they're not, or the time it takes to enforce them is strung out over months, years, decades. And so I just, if we're gonna do an ordinance, we should enforce it. And we should, if we can't enforce the ordinance that we currently have, why are we adding to it?
Can I take that one? Thank you for that question. I think, and this is, I think you had offered some questions in the previous meeting that, again, I think from a staff perspective, we fully understand that. And I would say agree with the aspects of that. I think the construction of this ordinance, the legal framing, our ability to generate regulatory language is sound. It's now becoming, I guess, less of a directed question towards staff, but towards, I guess, into the whole body of the council with staff, which is when we do this analysis of our community and our staff and our municipal abilities, specifically with maybe compliance in this idea, is what are we doing to support these ordinances as we're moving forward? And that could be attributed to the discussion with every city initiative that we've been working on the last couple of years, is we're trying to take these large progressive steps, but obviously that comes with the work or cost behind that. Same thing with infrastructure and roads and maintenance. It's that maintenance after the infrastructure has been installed. It's the same essential concept. So the question is, for me, a little less of, is this ordinance sound, or is it making the correct progressive steps that we need to be making? It's what are we doing to support this ordinance? Right. So that's, I think, a question for the council of, okay, within the structure, what questions do we need to be asking to ensure that the compliance team has what they have to enforce it the way that you see fit. Because I think that's also an additional category maybe Carly could talk to is with, like you said, the number of violations within the code, just to kind of put a big spectrum on that, is essentially you might be able to assess a violation to about every single property in Moab
For sure.
of some aperture, whether it's from the conforming nature of the lot, the parcel, the platting, all the way down to say weeds, something kind of more minor and seasonally. So with that, it's a matter of, okay, how are we supposed to approach that from the municipality structure that we are, which I'm kind of gesturing is into a small category. We have one, what I call a compliance officer running what is our compliance team, which is essentially our departments that run the code that would support that, with one compliance official, I'd say, and then 2 code enforcement officers. So I say within that, we're within this new structure, I think approaching that, like we mentioned last time, with weeds in particular, this year being, significantly more visual than past years. We issued, I think, I quoted last time over 72, and I think it's even over that to about somewhere north of 100, which is a lot of work. But we're also doing that in lieu of everything else. So getting back to your question, if a homeowner, the way we've structured this is designed around the conformity of a property, meaning it's a land use term. So every time we have those incremental reviews of a property, that's when this is going to come into effect. It's much less so along the policing mechanism. And by police, I don't mean our PD. I mean active enforcement. People out there, what Nevada has is grass police, literally going and patrolling for lawns and people watering during the day. We don't have that structure, but what we do have is just like within the building structure, every time that property changes ownership, there's a legislative amendment to the platting, everything else, that's when these properties can be brought into compliance. That is the only way, from at least the land use perspective, we can advance our zoning, our use parameters. So again, I feel confident in the way we've structured that over time, which is a zoning practice, nothing with zoning is immediate. It takes a long time for zoning to overturn and slowly turn the ship, which is the community. So it's a matter of how quickly does the council want to see this implemented?
No, okay, yeah. And I will say that, like, I support this ordinance. I think it's a great ordinance, and I commend you guys for all the work you've done on it and stuff. But I also think that you guys are doing work in vain if we're not sticking to what we're doing, on this. And so that's my big question. You guys, I think this is great, and I think that it will do what we need to do to help, reduce water use in the valley and stuff. But that was just my concern, and we can work, and I think we need to work towards that. I just I just don't want to see city ordinances pile down upon those that are in charge of enforcing them, and they can't enforce them. And so I think we need to support all the different agencies or departments that will be working with this. Totally. So that was just my
and I hope it was understood that,
yeah,
if anything, I'm really thankful you're asking that question, because I'm not pulling punches when I say that is the question. Right. So the ordinance, like you say, we support it, it's moving forward, but what is our practical input? So I think that needs, again, directing this to the council is, do we all feel that way? Do we feel that this is enforceable given our understanding of our budget, our understanding of our staffing? Because we'll do what it is we're directed to do, but like you're saying, do we have the capacity is maybe more the question.
And that's is the whole ordinance as a whole. The water portion of it is great, and this new thing with it. But there's this old ordinance where, there's literally yards in this town that if someone were to spark them or they drop a cigarette or something on them, they could burn down a house, or something like that. And so, I just want to make sure that we're looking at it wholly, not just the water ordinance, but this whole landscape ordinance as a whole.
Yeah,
I think so.
I just wanted to add something quickly, like something that's expensive to enforce or difficult to enforce isn't a reason not to have good policy into place, because we can't make progress without the policy, the ordinance, right? For the most part, people comply with ordinances. I think there's like a question of, is this going to be good or is this going to be perfect? It's probably not going to be perfect. We won't have perfect compliance, certainly. I think for the most part, there will be a lot of compliance and that people will be eager to especially new developments, won't really see this as much of a barrier to their development. It'll be a different story if we ever take a look at existing development. I think it's a whole new ballgame. We're kind of seeing that with our dark skies ordinance. So like new development has been really easy to regulate because they go through this, the planning staff has their hands all over them and the development, and we're seeing great compliance with those projects, but a lot more difficulty, trickiness when it comes to existing. So I'd say that's probably going to be harder to enforce. But, and you're right, Jason, when we're crafting the ordinances, we're like, how do we actually implement this? If someone wants to be a bad actor, it's very difficult to get them to comply. And I think we just have to acknowledge that's going to be the case. But for the most part, this is a community that wants to be part of solutions. We find they just have to be educated on them, or they don't understand them, or so.
And
That's
one additional piece to that is, again, the way we've framed landscaping, which historically has been kind of this ambiguous, vague requirement that has been a circular section within the code where it's always referencing another section that really doesn't define down what we need to be doing. We've essentially created the structure that it is as reviewable as any other development regulation aspect. So we'll call it building height, for just example. We will review in the same context building height as we are landscaping. So it's at that, again, that very incremental land use bigger picture is when I'm anticipating we're going to make that really effective change. But from day to day, like weeds, which is this still very loose and changing element that is really much more of a compliance realm versus land use realm, that might be a more difficult application, but we are certainly blending those two worlds here.
Yeah.
Because landscaping does evolve, walls typically don't or shouldn't evolve.
That's right.
But no, again, thank you for that question.
Excuse me, we're not taking comment from the public now. Kaylin?
So I think Jason raised an interesting scenario about the owner that buys an unlandscaped house. And like with a lot of the code enforcement for new construction, you're interacting with a general contractor, and there's accountability, but then it seems like that might break down a little bit with the homeowner who doesn't have the information or the contact with you. So I'm wondering if there might be an educational opportunity.
Yeah.
Oh, it sounds like you thought about
We
this.
talked about good volley.
So I'll just let that be a segue to you to pitch this new educational program.
Oh, we are working on education, and Mel, the Sustainability Vista, we are starting doing water audits in our own parks and things like that to try to work on our own landscaping, and also develop materials for people to help with that. And one of Ronnie's specific requests was like tree maintenance, things like that. So I agree with you. There is definitely a role for outreach and education, and we're ready to start doing that once we know what that looks like.
Carly had brought up dark skies. We've been working with the dark skies concept for 4 years now, four plus, of course. These are extremely similar in some of those fashions where the education component or the occupant, maybe not the contractor, maybe not the architect, is the one that might be making those changes, just like dark skies. So we are having all the experience that we've had are going to take all those learned lessons and then pour them into this ordinance as far as the outreach, the education, the facilitation that we'll do here in the office between sustainability, building, and planning. So we're hoping to, rather than what we've done as an evolving education process with dark sky, is have this robust rollout when this comes into effect. At least that's the hope.
Yep.
And we'll continue to learn, I'm sure.
Right. But if you intervene like with the homeowner, like right as they acquire it, then they won't have an excuse like they didn't know.
Totally. I mean, it's things as major as ADUs. We're having problems with that of people move into an ADU, but of course we have 3 different types of ADUs. Maybe they haven't read the code or aren't aware there even is one. So we're working through that process as well of trying to, with real estate agents, we're kind of getting to the more en route occupancy of how do we express that, hey, you've got some real perks to this property, but there's also some regulations you have to be aware of.
Yep.
Luke.
Yeah, and I really appreciate kind of this more multi-pronged approach, because I think I agree with a lot of the concerns that Jason had expressed. Like, I obviously have my own issues with like complaint-based system. And I wonder if it's potentially on the council to maybe set it as like one of our strategic plan discussions for this upcoming plan, to see if maybe there's like a hybrid approach where there are things that we've prioritized where they're either like a community safety thing, where yeah, maybe the costs don't cover it or whatever, but from a community safety perspective, it's important for us to be more proactive about that type of enforcement. And yeah, with us making so many significant changes to the code, like right now and in the coming years, I think it's asking a lot of community members to be staying on top of the code, to be able to actually submit complaints in response to all of these changes and everything, whereas keeping it in-house. But I do like the approach of having these points of the standard process, like if there's a new building permit, to catch those people, and like trying to create as many points where we minimize friction. And even potentially with like that situation or the scenario that Jason had suggested, is reaching out with local like sod providers or something, or anybody that works like that, just to make sure that they are like updating their clients, like, hey, are you aware of these changes? I see you're buying like 2,000 square feet of sod here. Like, I don't think this works with what's going here. And so, yeah, I think it's potentially hard to reach every single new homeowner that's going to be in the community, but it's a lot more manageable to reach out all of the businesses that are tied to landscaping and stuff like that. So, yeah, because at the end of the day, if we do move towards a more enforcement based thing, that's more staff, that's more like costs. And so I think kind of evaluating those different things can allow us to make sure that community safety is prioritized, while still trying to be as cost efficient with like taxpayer funds as possible.
Ronnie.
Oh, thanks. I think what I was going to say was going to be covered. Just for you guys who are new, this is nothing new. We've discussed it every year. So I'm hoping you'll be the ones and the newly elected people to finally get her done, because but I do think since you guys are thinking about it, yes, you might be the ones to finally implement. Every time you appropriate money, you have a line and you look at what that's adding to the enforcement burden, because it's true. We've definitely discussed it before, and everything we do comes with something, and we all know that we aren't, it's a frustration for us and a frustration for the residents that we can't necessarily always do it. But I also think, to Carly's point, I do think we have a lot of people who, want to follow the rules, and that just makes the education component huge, because you can only follow what you know. So you guys have covered it all. So.
Right. Connie, do you have anything?
Just a really quick question. Is the new like case management software, like, are we going to be able to have like better data available to us as to like what types of violations are being enforced, and kind of like,
You mean Spillman? Is Spillman tracking code compliance? I don't believe Spillman track. It's iWorks. We track it on iWorks, which is a different system that we've used for many years.
all right, but can it provide like good quality data for like?
I don't know that. Yes, it's better than certainly what's it called? I'm sorry, FatPot. Those different kinds of things. It's a little bit more reliable data. We see that, and Mona is pretty fastidious in her keeping, and so is Barry, so is Corey. Every kind of case goes into iWorks.
Yeah. Because I think it'd be interesting to kind of see a breakdown of potentially what like council or like staff members might identify as like kind of biggest points of concern within the community versus the actual numbers of complaints that we're receiving within the community. Because like that's one way for us to identify like, hey, this is what we might be more proactive about. And these are also kind of trends as to like what the community is currently actively caring about. And so can allow us to kind of evolve according to that. But
yeah,
I think when the council has the appetite for that, that iWorks framework has a fraction software that can break those down into whatever particular, whether it's by violation type, by areas. It has a pretty sophisticated function to be able to break down those reports. But whenever you're ready, as long as we can get the the idea of what those multiple reports might be, one being everything, maybe into categories and then a breakdown. We can do that, but yeah, give us a little time. We can certainly provide that.
Yeah, and we kind of, I don't know if you performed exactly that exercise, but after strategic planning this year, we heard a desire to be more proactive when it came to monitoring, to like policing, not just complaint based. And I don't know if I've mentioned this, maybe in like one-on-one with some of you. We still have the complaint-based system in place, but then there's also like a monthly schedule about high priority issues that the compliance team is kind of working at. So it's like a theme, you know, like food trucks is 1 month, weeds are another month. And it's probably from, I don't know if it's driven by the data, but maybe from the high points that they feel like we see through town or we're hearing complaints about in town, in an attempt to be, to create like a mixed system of compliance. So this really great work by this compliance team where they've become integrated, much more integrated, having weekly meetings about what they're focusing on and a little more strategic about, you know, what they're responding to. So we'll see it like after this year, how we feel about that, if we feel like we need more people. And it is helpful. I'll find like once we have an ordinance in place, it's easier for us to try to implement the ordinance and then start to make the case for why we need new capacity. I think it's the more process correct way to create the idea that we might need more help when it comes to enforcement rather than getting the capacity and then creating ordinances, if that makes sense. So we'll try to understand our experience and in a few years, we might need to make a change.
Is it possible that we could have that information at our strategic plan in January?
Oh, that might be
course.
great. Yeah.
Of course.
Because then we'll have new members and they'll want to know that information as well.
Of
And
course.
Great
then
idea.
we'll be talking about all this at that time anyway.
Yep.
So why don't we plan on that?
Absolutely.
Sounds good. All right. So any more? Yes, Keelan.
Well, it seems like we're close, and Jason and I talked about the water features, wind shutoff devices. And so in the interest of passing this tonight, I'm wondering if it would be acceptable, or if you see any issues with phrasing it as wind shutoff devices are required for waterfall features with greater than 4 gallon per minute flow or greater than 6 feet high in vertical fountains. Like, what do you think about that as both the wording as well as the quantities as a threshold for requiring wind shutoff devices?
My first, I think that sounds reasonable, to create thresholds. Do you have?
As far as the framework that functions, I'm wondering if the consultants maybe have
Yes.
a view on how maybe those particular thresholds would say, oh, that's a reasonable threshold, or maybe come down to 4 feet or something like that.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Unfortunately, I don't have that level of expertise about these shutoff devices to be able to contribute a number this evening.
Yeah, I would agree with Lindsay. It's those specific numbers are not in my expertise. We're happy to pull together some different types of manufacturer specifications and pull together some research if that would be useful, if that's the types of numbers we're trying to land on, or contact some landscape professionals that do install these water features to kind of get an understanding of the size and scope of what they're putting in.
What about me
see,
tailoring it to
I-
the manufacturerer's specifications?
Well, this is just a threshold below which they wouldn't be required, like just a small scale residential feature. So it's not so much like figuring out the specifics of those, but just creating a sort of the very low end of the water feature.
I would prefer a framework as proposed, just for functioning purposes in the review process. No matter what metrics, 4 gallons and 6 feet, no matter what we pick, there will be a friction point, which happens with, again, building height as an example, setbacks, everything. Everyone will, of course, build to the maximum, and then we'll have these very odd conversations about where that might actually be. But so if we feel, I think the intent was to allow, again, for our more residential amenity type uses to have that liberty and freedom. If you feel that that amount and then the height meets that, I'd prefer to keep it in those 2 metrics.
Right.
And whatever the metrics are, just the framework is what I'm saying. I agree with.
Is it an option to pass the ordinance, but leave that component out with a commitment to give you guys a little more time to get the numbers, and then we commit to adding that portion back in when you've had a chance to get the numbers. I mean, I don't feel like I have enough information to say 6 feet, is that good or not? Does that mean
We
I
can
can
do
put
it-
in something?
Probably
huge?
not
I
a
don't-
commitment. We can amend
Yeah.
the code at any time. It goes through the
Mhm.
typical land use code,
I
process.
just don't
which
want to
is
forget
lengthy.
about it if it's
Yeah,
not.
well,
Yeah.
my initial impression is that we
Mhm.
add it to the municipal code rewrite. And that just is
Right.
sort of it on, we have a lot of like items that we know we want to address when it comes to the
Mhm.
municipal code rewrite. We're going to be revisiting the entire code in the next few months. We're preparing an RFP for it. And so I don't know that the code will be what it is. That's what the ordinance will say, despite necessarily an intention to revisit it. But as staff, we can certainly say this is one of the things we know we need to address.
I'm almost more interested than in passing it as is. And if someone has it promoted and, wants to do the research and come back to the council and say, okay, well, let's scale this down some with having had the time to choose some numbers. I'd almost feel better about that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I can see that.
yeah.
I feel like for the amount of work of processing a land use, this is in chapter 17, right?
Yes.
Right. So then it has to go through planning commission and public hearing. And so doing that all for this one little thing seems a little excessive. So it might be just leave it. It might stay in for a couple of years until you get feedback on this and identify what would benefit from adjustments.
It's also an approach. I was wondering if there's an exception. We have many exceptions to this when it's appealed to the relevant authority, whoever it is.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if there's an opportunity for if it were to come to you, Corey, or to the planning commission, where I don't mean to put you on the spot, where if it's I don't know how many of these are going to be put in the next year, right? So we might have one applicant who has a big question. Is there a way we can address those concerns without sort of upsetting changing the entire code? What's your impression?
Totally.
Yeah.
The framework is we'll have to assess a criteria to it,
Yeah.
which ultimately comes down to, similar to maybe a traditional conditional use structures, you have to have some basis to make those rational findings or reasonably debatable arguments. What an option might be, in light of what Carly has said, we are advancing. And if you remember from our last January sessions, what we've now begun calling our hot topic code changes, those that are immediately in need of amendment prior to the RFP. So we're already advancing those with planning commission. This could be an item that is brought along with those, which you'll probably be seeing in the month of October, your first round. There's many rounds going from less complex to more complex. The first round will be very obvious minor adjustments to the code. It could be something that's brought along with that. It can be brought along individually. But what I might suggest is, if we do go that route, leaving the text as is, which is the more restrictive. And then if anybody's coming in this time frame, they would have to start planning for that wind shut off. And it could be, even with a single household or duplex, many months down the road before they're actually into a construction phase or construction level documents, that this could be accomplished between now and then. That if all of a sudden it now does go to 6 or 4 feet, they can just cut that from the plan. They've got that money back in their pocket now. So that'd be versus the offering a metric now that we're going to change. I would just keep it. They have to produce it for now, but then we'll work on putting in that that framework for either an exception or just a by right permitted boundary, that triggering mechanism.
So yeah, you'll see it again in a month. Does that sound? We'll do some research, try to find out if we have a more rational reason for where we're setting the thresholds, and add that to the suite of kind of minor amendments that we'll make.
I'm willing to make a motion, or did we already have one and I forgot?
No, we haven't made a motion.
Okay.
Please do.
I move that council approve ordinance 2023-08, an ordinance amending the text of the Moab Municipal Code, section 17.06, definitions, 17.09, supplementary requirements and procedures applicable within zones, and creating chapter 17.10, landscaping standards, to add water efficient landscaping standards with review and approval procedures.
Thanks, Ronnie. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Kaylin. Discussion, Ronnie.
Nope. Thank you.
Kaylin.
No, but again, thank you for all your work on this.
Anybody else?
I was just gonna say thank you. And Yeah, I think if we can do that in a month,
Yep.
that would work great.
All right, anybody else?
No, just thank you to the staff and planning commission and everybody else involved in this. This was a very long and detailed
Yep.
process.
It has been.
All right. Motion made by Ronnie, seconded by Kayla. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, guys. We'll look forward also to your educational process. So we can talk more about that later. But thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Nice discussion, you guys. That was really good. Thanks. Yes.
Did we skip an agenda item?
Did we do what?
What about Sherman?
We did that.
I think Quincy and Victoria.
We did. We did. Oh my gosh.
I have it checked. Yeah. Motion made by Caitlin, seconded by Luke. All right, next up is Alexi again. To consideration for you guys to consider 2023 electric vehicle charging station site agreement with Pacific Core for Lions Back Park, or Lions Park, not Lions Back. Sorry.
Lions Park.
They, they'll do their own charging stations up there, but city won't be part of it. Okay,
All right. You'll be ready to get rid of me soon. Okay. What we have this evening is I'm going to do a brief update on existing conditions of electric vehicles in town, why we're interested in adding more infrastructure, and an agreement that we have available to add electric vehicle infrastructure in Lions Park. So starting with currently, EVs would help our goals of greenhouse gas reduction, combined with our goal of being 100% renewable energy that could make electric vehicles an extremely low emission option for transportation. But we have two public level 2 chargers that have maintenance challenges due to a variety of things that are not a discussion item for tonight. We also have limited access to fast charging. It's largely available through private businesses and mainly with proprietary hookups, so not everybody can use them. We are a priority spot for fast charging with new programs coming out for the federal government. The goal is to have fast charging every 50 miles along priority corridors, which includes 191. Pacific Core, via Rocky Mountain Power, our utility provider, as a utility has funding to develop capacity in priority locations like Moab. So what the proposal is and the specifics would end up going through our review and permitting processes. So this is not final. This is kind of conceptual at this point. Is that they started with wanting to install 4 chargers and having expansion opportunity for 4 more, but based on the demand they've been seeing in other places they're installing these, they would like to start with 6 to 8 fast chargers with 6 to 8 designated stalls. One would potentially be a pull-through station. In addition to having the chargers and the designated stalls, there would be a pad. This is an estimate at this point since we don't have final drawings, but about 16 feet by 25 feet that would have equipment and a transformer. Due to the large amount of space required for the equipment, also that this location is at the intersection of highways and that there's some available amenities like bathrooms, water, and shade and transit access. That's why this park is the location that we've identified for these. Adding this much space in like our downtown area would be difficult due to the transformers and all the other things and assigning parking just to EVs. So the agreement that we have the option for right now, it has already been signed by Pacific Core, is a 10-year duration. The city of Moab would provide the land. Pacific Core would provide, install, and maintain the equipment. And then Moab residents and visitors would gain access to public fast charging that would be available with broad usage hookups. The agreement currently has been reviewed by our legal counsel as a city. It's been signed by Pacific Core and it requires approval from Moab City Council. And then following that, what would happen if we chose to participate in this would be that Pacific Core would have to go through our own review process. And that's when we would finalize what we're actually getting in that area with fast charging. I've also included pricing here. They would have the ability to charge pricing, but as a publicly regulated utility, that has to go through the Public Service Commission. This is the current schedule. Are there any questions or any discussion?
Ronnie.
I was going to thank people for the questions on the shared document, because I know I learned a lot about, why this location, because just for people who don't have access to that, there was some good discussion. Jason was asking, wouldn't we be better off if these were downtown because people could go shopping and such, while they were charging. But the answer was that they need a certain amount of square footage to put these up, and right now that's what we have to offer. I think people are probably wondering, and there was a reference earlier, so maybe just to make that clear, are we foreseeing a future in which we might be able to accommodate some of these downtown?
There is a possibility that
Mhm.
private service providers could provide them, like at gas stations, things like that. So they
okay.
could be available that way. In addition, we have plans for level 2 chargers, which would be a slower charger
Okay.
that are stubbed out in the dispersed parking plan and also King Creek.
Okay.
And recall that we kind of came to the council about how we would decide how those level 2 chargers would be, like we're going to own them, but we're going to go out with an RFP, basically a competitive process to know how to put the level 2 chargers downtown. Yeah.
Okay, and then just because we've been talking about opportunity costs, so obviously, one thing I'd asked on the shared document was like, oh, okay, are these parking slots now going to be open to anyone or just people with EVs? And it sounds like the intention is they are for people with EVs. So just in our discussion that we were just having about enforcement, it adds another thing to the enforcement list that someone will be in a position if they're with code enforcement or law enforcement and they see someone parked there that shouldn't be, I guess, to do something. It does occur to me that we may or may not have a scenario, where things are busy at Lions Park there and nobody's charging and people are staring at those empty slots, chomping at the bit. But I guess we'll deal with that just as long as we know it's an opportunity cost and just something. I did have a random question. This is just a nerdy question. Does anyone know if we go as a local, and I don't have an EV, but if I did, how is Rocky Mountain Power going to know we're local? Does it have something to do with the machine when you plug in and you're getting charged that you're putting as, I don't know, a zip code or who knows what?
I don't have the
Yeah.
specifics on
Okay,
the
that's
charging,
fine,
but
I
I know
just-
in general, usually that when you do payment, like there's
Yeah.
an app or there's some other things, and that's probably where you would be identified as a local.
Yeah. And I got in the agreement that, if the chargers are down for more than a month, certain things kick into gear, but just on the public notice thing, because I think we've all experienced some ire when we hear from people, I went to the station to charge and it was down and, there was no way for me to know before I got there. And so if for some reason they are planning some kind of, upgrade or alteration, I know they're allowed to do all these things or even removal, will they give us some kind of notice ahead of time so that maybe we can update our own maps early enough? And I didn't know if this only kicked in if it was a month or if,
If they change the contract, they do have to notify us. And then if it were like a month, then, that also affects the contract. They have verbally committed to it, but it's not explicitly written that they have to immediately notify us if they decided something broke and they're not going to fix it.
Okay. Thanks, that was it.
Also, in response to your question about, or your comment about parking, it was a discussion that I had with Rocky Mountain Power. And one of the points I thought that they made that was helpful for me too, was that as this infrastructure comes in and we have fast chargers every 50 miles, EVs are becoming more common and it becomes less restrictive about who can park there. That eventually it could be that many people, whether they're charging or not, actually are driving EVs and could be charging.
Yeah. Okay. And then I guess one final question is just the ADA space. It's not like there'll be no other ADA parking, right? Like this is just ADA EV, right?
Yeah, we're not replacing the ADA spots. We're just making sure that the EV parking also has accessibility.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Jason?
So my concern with this, and I understand this is a big deal to put it here and stuff, is that is location, and part of it was to support, the 80% reduction, in greenhouse gases, which I assume we're targeting Moab residents for that, and people that are coming through town. And I called yesterday, I called everybody I knew with an EV car, and I said, hey, we're thinking about putting, this is the proposal to put it in Lions Park, and this was locals, and all of them were like, You gotta be kidding. That's so far out of town,
Mhm.
you know, and so I think that having these chargers outside of town, it's not helping locals. And all these locals did say, like, you know what, I have a charger in my garage, you know, but they also said too, most chargers in my garage, I can do about they charge about 10 miles per hour is what you're getting out of it.
Mhm.
And I go, would you use these stations if they were in town? They go, yeah, I totally would. You know, I go to Grand Junction for the day. The next day I have to go to Provo or to Salt Lake. I can't get that charge out of my garage. I'm going to end up going to Green River or someplace to get this charge done. And I go, but going out to Lions Park is burdensome, even though it's only 2 miles, you know, and stuff like that. So I think that, you know, this isn't truly something that's improving the lives of Moab locals, you know. Yeah, they can go out there, they can go bouldering, they can chase mosquitoes, they can go ride the bikes at the bike path, you know, whatever out there. And it's a beautiful place. It is that. And a couple of them said, you know, there are EV chargers that are in remote locations. They suck. You know, they're horrible. You're sitting in your car playing Tetris on your screen while it charges. You know, where I think if as a city and a town, if these were in town, you know, we're not making anything off this. And I think that that's fine to some extent. However, one person said to me, they're like, there's superchargers at Costco. I go to Costco, I plug it in, I go in there, I spend $200. You know, for Grand Junction or for Costco, that's sales. For us in Moab, finding a place in town, it's sales tax. You know, so while we're giving up this land, we're giving up, you know, these parking spaces, you know, we could be getting 32 cents on a Starbucks coffee or something like that, which, you know, it's not a ton of money, but it's better than zero. And it's allowing people all the time are like, I talk to people all the time, like, yeah, we charge our car, we run down, grab something to eat, come back, it's charged. You know, and so I feel that we need superchargers. It is a need. But you know, it's just, I feel like Lions Park isn't the place to do it. And I understand that has the real estate to pull it off, but it needs to be for locals. It needs to be first, you know, and it needs to be for the community. And I think that out there, you're not serving the community. That's my. So
Cameron, do you have a question then, Ronnie?
Sure. So I talked to Cherie Major today,
Mhm.
and so I can share what she relayed to me that the Council on Aging and the county are pursuing in response to that, or you can. Either way.
Well, if you talked to her today, last time I heard from her was in July,
Well,
so.
it sounds like she's been gone, isn't updated either. So she was wondering too where the county efforts stand. But in any event, it sounds like the county is pursuing this as well. It sounds like there's an outfit that will facilitate the grant writing and the placement of them. And the county was looking at the Grand Center and the parking lot behind the courthouse, and as well as Lions Park and a couple of other locations. So it sounds like this may not be like, there's a bunch of money out there and this may not be the end of fast charging in Moab. And I totally agree with Lady Say, like, I don't think if this is our only fast charging, it's not the optimal location, but it seems like work will continue and we'll get more. That's my hope, and I'm optimistic.
No, we're not
So-
taking comments from the public. Go ahead, Jason.
I mean, could they, you know, in the places that were kind of discussed was like the parking area, you know, on First North, you know, would be a great place, but it doesn't sound like there's enough spots for it, you know, or even behind our buildings here, you know, and, you know, and stuff. And I'm sure that you've exhausted every possible area. I know that you have and stuff, but I just, you know, I just have a hard time supporting something that's not supporting locals directly. And that is encouraging that things are in the pipeline. But, you know, for this, I just,
Yeah, it's certainly not the end of the story. That's why it was stubbed out for dispersed parking, because we want to be able to serve locals, and Cane Creek is going to be stubbed out for not necessarily the fast chargers. I mean, it's about real estate. It's about like capacity in the transmission lines. You can't just sort of necessarily put them anywhere. It's where the electrical infrastructure can also handle the load. Like the load is pretty profound for these fast chargers. So you have to be a little more strategic. We looked at like other places that are kind of easy to get in and out, like Emma Boulevard. We looked at by kind of by the Best Western, where we have a parking lot, and those kinds of, it seemed that Lions Park really rose to the top because of all the amenities that are right there. It is still in the city. Locals can use it if they want to kind of go out a couple miles north. It's still available to them, certainly, but not as centrally located as we'd hope the other infrastructure.
And there are charging stations right in town, fast chargers at Rocky Mountain's site now.
They have one, and it's Rocky Mountain Power has decided it's obsolete. So we actually don't have a fast charger for like non-proprietary hookups right now. People have driven to Green River or Monticello to get them.
Ronnie, I think you had a question or a comment.
Oh, I didn't really at this point have anything to add other than, I mean, one of the things when I was looking at Alexi's answers that she had given us that I thought was a good point is we do have the transit system now. So, and certainly I support doing things for locals, but I mean, we are a tourist town and we have to serve everybody, and our greenhouse gas emissions come from everybody. So I guess I view this as the beginning, not the end. And it'd be one thing if we had the option to put it everywhere. Of course, we'd put it downtown instead of down there. But if this is what we have for now and it's helping the overall burden, then I feel like I'm okay with it, because I mean, I do know people who go for walks down there. They'll leave for a bike ride from there so they could charge while they're doing it, or, you know, they'll go play in the park or play in the water. So I do feel like there probably, you know, some reasons locals have for being down there. But I do think the transit system adds another way, you know, if you want to charge and go do something. But I mean, I do agree if we just don't have those options to start downtown, but I would definitely support anything that is finding creative ways to bring them downtown and just kind of down the valley in different places.
If we approach developers, you know, like, and people who have, you know, land to put in like fast charger, like such as, you know, Tesla has those new stations south of town. You know, I talked to someone, they said that Rivian had come to town. You know, has anybody approached them and said, hey, you have a Tesla one here, would you be interested in putting, you know, a fast charger over here?
This particular contract, Rocky Mountain approached us because, you know, they wanted city property to do this one. But there are, I mean, I just wrote a letter of support to the North Maverick, who there's a lot of money right now for implementing EV chargers. And so I have a feeling we're going to see a lot more gas stations. I mean, that's who Rocky Mountain is really looking at, is people that provide gas, because that's where people go to get, you know, they pull into the gas station. So again, I just wrote a letter of support, and I'm willing to write other letters of support for private businesses that want to take advantage of that grant opportunity from Rocky Mountain.
Right. I just talked to a lot of the chamber businesses, you know, and stuff like that. And most of them were like, we would love to see something in town that supported, you know, local businesses, you know.
I think it's coming, Jason. I think we're going to see a big jump in this kind of endeavor in the next year or two, for sure.
Yeah, all the IRA monies, like that infrastructure money, sort of starting to filter through. So.
Yeah.
Kaylin, do you have anything else to add?
No, I'm ready to make a motion.
One more, I just have one comment or one question I have on the contract. You know, things change, technology changes. Do we have a provision in the contract that requires Rocky Mountain to remove them if things change? Because what we don't want is to have obsolete charging stations at Lions Park, and then we're stuck with removing them. And I see Nathan has his hand up.
Yes, there's a couple things I wanted to go over. Yes, that provision is in there. Particularly it's under paragraph 2D, that if they stop using it, then they have to remove it. The other thing that it says is that if the charging station becomes inoperable, they have 1 month to fix it. So there are provisions in this contract that require them to remove it at their cost, not ours, them to maintain it at their cost, not at the city's, and to remove it or fix the stations if they become inoperable. So
Great.
those provisions are in there. The other thing, I just as a point of clarification, when we put this together, I left a blank under paragraph 2D for them to indicate the minimum number of working stations they would maintain. They were supposed to fill that in when they signed it. They didn't. They did provide, however, the exhibit. So we just need to, when we approve this, make sure that we fill in that blank under 2D about the number of working stations they're going to maintain. As I look at the exhibit, my understanding is that they're agreeing to do 4 minimum stations with the potential to add 4 additional more. So Lexi, unless I'm wrong, I think we would put in 4 there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I just
So
want to
we're-
make sure we get that so that's approved
part of the
because it would be a change from what's been presented.
All right, so we need to have that as part of the motion. Kaylin, do you want to make one?
Sure, I'm just looking for that. I think it's 2D.
Yes, if you look in 2D in the paragraph towards, it's the second, I guess it's the third to last line. It
Oh,
says-
I see the amount. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's what needs to be filled in. Yep.
Okay. I move to approve the charging station site license agreement between the City of Moab and Pacific Corp, amending 2D to include lessee will no longer have the ability to use the premises. Lessee needs to maintain no less than 4 working charging stations on the premises.
All right, motion by Kaylin,
I'll second.
second by Ronnie. Any further discussion, Kaylin?
No.
Ronnie? Anybody else? I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, I'm gonna do a roll call vote. Jason,
Nay.
Ronnie,
Aye.
Luke.
Aye.
Kaylin?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0 with Jason,
4-1.
4-1, sorry, thank you, with Jason voting nay. All right, thanks, Alexi. All right, and our last item, 6.6, consideration of approval of a settlement agreement with Ensign Hospitality and Moab Hospitality LLC. This is the Element Hotel. Settlement agreement is in the amount of $429,879. Questions for Carly? Motion?
I'll make a motion.
All right,
Make a motion to move to approve the proposed settlement agreement as executed by Ensign Hospitality LLC and Moab Hospitality LLC collectively Ensign.
motion by Jason, second,
I'll second.
second by Tawny. Discussion, Jason, Tawny,
No, let's just rip the Band-Aid off.
anybody else? I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Oh, wait, roll call vote.
Yeah.
This is a liability of the city. Jason,
Aye.
Luke.
Aye.
Kaylin.
Aye.
Tawny.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. All right, that's the end of our general business, and we're gonna move right into city manager updates.
Great, good evening. I have a couple of things to go over from the past few weeks. First, I wanted to thank the organizers and the participants of the Day of Service last week. They worked and it was a day of service remembrance of the anniversary of 9/11. And we had a really great, wonderful crowd come out to help with some flood mitigation work on the parkway, some cleanup, debris cleanup. The people that I know were definitely involved, and I'm sure I'm going to forget some people. Cara Downrend, who's helping, she has a contract with us through Rim to Rim Restoration, doing a lot of our flood mitigation work. Colin Topper, Jeremy Spalding, the school district, the LDS Church helped out. So really great group of volunteers, and I want to thank them for that really important work. We need as many hands on the parkway cleaning up the debris as we can get. Last week, Jason and Michael and I attended the ULCT annual convention. I presented at a breakout session about 2 items. It was a group presentation on cities who have forward-thinking policies. And so I spoke about the active employee housing ordinance and our dark skies ordinance. Got some really good questions. I got the most questions out of all the participants on the panel, and that is the most important thing. It is a competition. So I felt like I won that. And that's what I went to do, and I achieved my goal. Really good conference. I hope to see some of you at the spring conference too in St. George. I'm happy to make a staffing announcement. So we have made an offer to a new Parks, Recreation and Trails director. And she kind of gave notice yesterday, so we're able to say who she is now. Her name is Brianna Bowker. Brianna is the Deputy Parks Director up in Astoria, Oregon. Really great interview, good energy. She seems very passionate about parks work and really excited to move to Moab. So she will be starting at the end of October. We're going to bring her down though, because it's quite a bit of time before she gets here just to meet the staff and kind of have a team meeting in the meantime. So I'm looking forward to you guys meeting her and working with her. Some upcoming events I wanted to let you know about. Oh, and I forgot to ask, Lexi's still here. Oh, excellent. We have the sustainability plan survey out online. Alexi, when does it close? Okay, terrific. Thank you for reminding me you can go online to the city's website to participate in that survey. The Parks Master Plan open house. We have a second open house, or maybe it's a first. We have an event, is the first. We had the survey earlier, that's right. Open house is tomorrow at the Mark from 4:30 to 6 p.m. That's September 13. Please come out. We have the results of the survey, and there's some preliminary findings when it comes to that survey, and some preliminary drafts of what we're thinking about for that master plan. Letting you know, I guess there have been some questions about when we get a transit update, just about the success of the transit plan or the transit program, and what kind of numbers we're looking at and how we're going to be thinking about moving into the next season. We'll be having a workshop or debrief during the next council meeting just to present some of the data. And then we want to get your feedback on how we program the winter season. So we have a couple of options, but we want to get your impressions as well. And we'll have a staff recommendation, but looking forward to that discussion. Finally, I want to let you know that Moab Arts is accepting applications for spring public arts projects. So the public arts can include murals, sculptures, mosaics, crosswalk design, installations, those kinds of things. The city is looking to select 3 to 4 projects. We have about $12,000 to spend on them total. You can contact Moab Arts staff if you have questions about that application, but proposals are due November 1st and they need to be completed in the spring. So really exciting to get some more public art out in the community. And that's all I've got.
Thanks, Carly. All right, council reports, Connie.
I don't have a lot. I went to the dinner for the Day of Service First Responders dinner the other night. It was fun. It was good food. And I didn't have really any other meetings. I went and saw my mom a couple of weeks ago, and I met some people in Brigham City, and they just could not tell us how wonderful they thought Moab was. They raved about the restaurants that they went to and how much fun their kids had, and they were just, it felt really good to hear that kind of feedback when you're out of town. So that was about it.
Thanks, Connie. Keelan.
I'd like to just start with a question of Carly. So I didn't know about the parks open house, and I'm not finding it on the city website.
Not on this. We have ads out for sure. And I thought we had social media. I'm not sure if I saw like a flyer for the Parks Master Plan open house. I did not check. I can check with Lisa. It might not be on there. Or like you're looking at the calendar events.
Yeah,
Right,
I saw it
like
on
it's-
social media, but
Yeah.
Okay, well, for those of us that are custodians of our mental health.
There's nowhere for you
Right,
to
if we
go
could
anymore.
access it through like static websites.
Yeah, maybe we did not advertise it on the website. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, and we can be a little more, cast a wider net
All
for
right,
the next events. Thanks for that.
to us dinosaurs. I attended a travel council meeting today, and the entire time was spent on working on sort of preliminary budgeting requests for so maybe thankful for our staff here that support us in that process. But they're just trying to balance maintaining revenue with the other responsible recreation and softer goals of the county. Community Renewable Energy Agency had their regular meeting, and sort of chugging along there. There's a utility agreement that is a significant benchmark for the process between all the individual communities and Rocky Mountain Power. And the agency agreed to the last point of negotiation with Rocky Mountain Power on that weeks ago, and haven't heard back. So feeling a little frustrated about that, because that was initially possible. In the initial timeline, it was going to be signed months ago, and then it's keeps getting moved back and moved back. So not sure what's going on there, but more news eventually. The Housing Task Force did not meet this month. We're working hard on the updated housing plan, and we're going to have a special session on that last week, and they got moved to tomorrow. So nothing to report there. That's what I've got.
Great. Thanks, Kayla and Luke.
So as a heads up for everybody, the Planning Commission will be having a meeting this Thursday and is looking for public comment on a consideration to amend the permitted uses and regulations in the industrial zoning district to relax the zoning requirements for self-storage warehouse developments, and to add the permitted use for dog kennels indoor/outdoor. So I think that's the only agenda item for Thursday. So if you're not able to attend in person, please feel free to submit a written comment. I attended Trail Mix earlier today. There's discussion about National Public Lands Day on September 23rd, where there's going to be work happening on the Kestrel Run Trail. There's also going to be a free movie night, likely at Star Hall, which will include raffle prizes. Tomorrow, there's going to be a combined Grand County Weed Department and Trail Mix Go-Ahead Roundup at Power Dam at 6 p.m. if anybody wants to join that. And then we've received some updates on issues regarding the Spanish Valley Bike Path now that Chris Baird is gone, but Jacques assured everyone that it's still a huge priority for the county. And then Trail Mix plans to dive deeper into the draft Monte La Salle Forest Plan in the next few weeks to assess and make recommendations to the county commission. And I think GCAT's gearing up to review motorized transportation plans. So there's a lot going on there. We have our local homeless council meeting tomorrow, and then there's also the YGP Weed and Feed tomorrow. So there's a lot happening tomorrow.
Thanks, Luke. Ronnie?
Okay, let's see. We have had 2 groundwater and sewer meetings canceled, the last 2. So our next one should be September 21st. So hopefully that's coming. Let's see. I attended a September 11th water workshop. A resident let me know about that. I think you were all emailed about, called Identifying Alternatives to Snow-Based Streamflow Predictions. To advance future drought predictability. And this was put on by the Western Water Assessment, which is a NOAA funding program headquartered at the University of Boulder, which partners with the University of Utah and University of Wyoming. Their mission is to conduct innovative research in partnership with decision makers, helping them make the best use of science to manage for climate impacts. And so what they basically had was kind of an introduction to how water modeling can be used towards this, but 2 grad students talking about some of the lessons learned about different models. And kind of traditionally that people have, immediately gone to snowfall, which makes sense because in the West, we look at snowfall and how it melts and turns into surface water. But really as things change and certainly in drought situations where snowfall becomes less of a predictor and you kind of have to look at some other parameters and predictors. So really good webinar. I would suggest to anyone to kind of explain the role of different predictors, identifying the right predictors for your basin, because they apparently are different for every basin, and how different models can produce similar results, and how it's key to get the right parameters into your model. And this seemed timely in the sense that I know Grand County is working on pursuing water modeling and continues to hope that the city will collaborate and either do something in parallel or talk to them about that. So the main thing to know is that WWA is probably a great resource for us. There are all these students studying these different models and looking specifically at basins in the Southwest. And there are a lot of lessons learned. So just so you know, they work directly with communities and water systems to build resilience to compound hazards. They center on the needs of frontline communities. They advance user-relevant research on snowpack, wildfire, and water supply, and integrate and prioritize social science research. They also are running the Intermountain West Climate Dashboard and do monthly briefings on climate and water. So just probably a great resource for all of us if you didn't know about it. And I think you all got the email, but if you need the link to the workshop, way too much good data in there to get into here. I did spend some time looking into that algal bloom at Ken's Lake that you probably all know about. Just to let you guys know, Orion Rogers at the Southeast Utah Health Department told me earlier today he's planning on putting out a press release. He might have already done it today, but it should be coming out soon. Otherwise, just some things to know. It sounds like with our particular situation at the moment, the primary concern is for pets. I think those of you who have dogs have probably been on sites and getting educated about what you need to do. We did talk a little bit about causes, and harmful algal blooms are relatively complicated. So it can be hard to know the cause. Usually it's a high nutrient load, like a lot of fertilizer, cow manure, a leaking septic system. But Orion, of course, noted that that doesn't seem to be the issue here. So anyway, working on understanding that. He is telling people that he thinks it'll be gone from the lake by Thanksgiving when it's getting colder. There were some just questions if you've been hearing these from people. Some people have been referencing the Virgin River and what's going on there, but he said that's a different situation. And he has been looking into local concerns as they come in. I know someone reported a concern at Courthouse Wash to me recently, and he said he was just up on the mountain checking on Uwal Lake. So for anyone interested, the best sites for just information to educate yourself about blooms is the Utah Department of Environmental Quality. And all of us are encouraged to report potential blooms to the Department of Environmental Quality. Phone numbers 801-536-4123. And certainly if you have local questions, you can call Orion. And I think a lot of you probably know him, but this is Orion Rogers. He's the Environmental Health Director at the Southeast Utah Health Department. His phone number is 435-259-5602. I had some other meetings I don't really have to say more about other than we do have a date now with the county in Castle Valley for the second water workshop. First one was Water 101. This will be Water 201, Water and Climate Science in Grand County. That will be Friday, October 20th, 6 p.m. at USU. Stay tuned for more information. And former Mayor Niehaus and I had a conversation and we're talking to local Indigenous community about how to recognize and celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day this year, which will fall on October 9th. So we'll have more information for that as it gets closer. That was it.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Mhm.
Jason.
Couple things. On the 29th, I was able to meet with the mayor and John Curtis. And it was a great meeting. We were able to talk about, I really wanted to talk to him about the EAS contract, the Essential Air Service, and just how critical that was for Moab and for our residents, and explain to him that that it's kind of stalled on the Secretary of Transportation's desk, and it hasn't moved, and asked him if he could help push that along. He asked for information on that, which I also talked with Jacques, who met with him a couple days later, and asked Jacques to also enforce that with him, which he did. And then he was asked, he was concerned about tourism and where we are, because he seemed like he knows that that's our main economic drive, and is wondering about arches and stuff. And I think we kind of let him know that arches seem to be working fine with the reservation system and that. And then we also talked a little bit about the land where the remediation for the pile is, and what we need to do to try to work on that with getting that a plan for that once it's taken care of. That was really good. Then I went to the ULCT convention, which I thought was great. Had a good time there, and learned a lot as always. One of the sessions I went to was paying for infrastructure, which seemed like a lot of people in the state are in the same boat that we are, where we're not alone in when we're bidding a project or when we're planning a project, then we go out to bid the project, and then when they actually start moving dirt, costs are doubling. And it's a trend throughout the state, and people are trying to figure it out. A lot of experts were there saying that there's infrastructure is critical, as we all know, and putting it off is a very bad idea. That with inflation, things are going up 8 to 10% per year, and you're kind of hedging your bets on the future. And so far, the future has not shown reduced rates in construction, and talking about how doing nothing is not a plan, and so I thought that was pretty good, and it's good feedback there. Carly did a great job representing the city in her seminar. It was good that everybody was like, there's a lot of people in there, and she brought up some really good points, and there's a lot of really good questions. I think at the end when they did the question session, it seemed like they were all kind of at Carly, in some sense. So and then that's kind of that's about it. That's all I have. So
Thanks, Jason. Jason already talked about some of the things that he and I did together. One was meeting with Congressman Curtis, which is excellent. It's always good to meet with our representatives when they're in town and sharing some of the concerns that we have. I won't mention the comment that dropped their jaws, but we'll be talking more about that soon. I also attended a ribbon cutting for Emma Boulevard. Finally got that parking lot done, so that was good. Met with Commission Chair Jacques Handler to start preparing for our C4 meeting, which will be October 18th. I think what we scheduled at the last time. Had an AOG meeting, which I have monthly. At that meeting, that was a very productive meeting. We reviewed all the GoEd grants. There's 3. Tonight, a couple citizens presented to us about an opportunity for one of those grants that staff has been talking about in terms of how we can actually utilize that money this year. There's a water infrastructure grant as well that we did apply for the water tank. And so we'll see where that plays out. Hopefully we'll get that funding too, and then we can talk about placement and those kind of things, Kaylin, that we've had discussions about in the past. I've made a presentation to the Grand County Commission regarding the split of rural health sales tax for healthcare sales tax for the Canyonlands Healthcare Special Service District and EMS. Liz Tubbs, the chair of EMS, and I meet every year to kind of make sure we're all on the same page. We agreed to 57-43% split again for this year. We'll see what the commission does. It's ultimately up to them. But that was a good presentation. It was really productive to also hear what other special service districts' needs are. And it's all about everything's expensive. Everybody needs more money. So that's all I have. And we need to make a motion to go into an executive session to strategize and discuss the sale of real property.
I move to go into closed session to discuss strategy regarding the sale of real property.
Do I have a second? Second by Luke. All in favor?
Hi.
Motion passes 5-0. We'll go into an executive as soon as